What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. In this week's weekly one-shot, I'm going to be talking about the Detail Comics pull list, the books that I pick up every single week, and how I went about purging and managing those. So the biggest thing to realize is that the pull list is probably one of the most key aspects of creating any kind of relationship with your local comic shop. So a lot of people are going to be purchasing comic books online, which is totally fine, but if you're into, paperback, if you like actually the feel of a page, you like the glossiness of a cover, you like the lenticulars and all those variants and those kind of things, your real key, your real gateway into getting exactly what you need is through your pull list. And here's the thing, over the course of the last year and a half or so, I have probably put a ton of money into comic books that were on and off my pull list. I've actually got a list right here. So let's start from the top. Black Panther, Batman, Gwenpool, Amazing Spider-Man, Batman TMNT, Spider-Man, Deadpool, Moon Knight, Spider-Gwen, Spider-Man, Old Man Logan, Empress, Harley Quinn, Mighty Thor, Doctor Strange, Saga, Daredevil, Invincible Iron Man, Detective Comics, Justice League, Silk, All New Wolverine, Superman, Flash, Batgirl, Green Lanterns, Captain America, Steve Rogers, Action Comics, Totally Awesome Hulk, Wonder Woman Ultimates, Superman, American Alien, Deathstroke, Carnage, Suicide Squad, Amazing Spider-Man, and Silk the Spider-Fly Effect. Aquaman, Teen Titans, Titans, Green Arrow, Vision, Wicked and the Divine, Four Kids Walk into a Bank, Betty and Veronica, Constantine, Hyperion, Nova, The Fix, Black Knight, Goldie Vance, Joyride, Sheriff of Babylon, Omega Men, Satellites Falling, Snot Girl, Civil War II, Han Solo, Dark Knight, The Last Crusade, Civil War II, Amazing Spider-Man, Punisher, Nighthawk, Thunderbolt, Scooby Apocalypse, Captain Marvel, Descender, TMNT Universe, Renato Jones, Black Monday Murders, Black Hammer, Seven to Eternity, Exo Manowar, Cryptocracy, Black, All-Star Batman, Trinity, Supergirl, Superwoman, Doom Patrol, Nightwing, Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, Deadpool vs. Gambit, Raven, Killer Be Killed, Civil War II Kingpin, Glitter Bomb, Frostbite, Animosity, Kingsway West, Motor Crush, God Country, Justice League vs. Suicide Squad, Curse Words, Hawkeye, Hulk, Dr. Aphra, Gamora, Avengers, Champions, Clone Conspiracy, Unworthy Thor, Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows, Infamous Iron Man, Jessica Jones, Venom, Ghost Rider, Reborn, Occupy Avengers, Mosaic, Bullseye, Elektra, Kingpin, Cage, Mother Panic, Future Quest, Moonshine, Cave Carson, Shade the Changing Girl, Prowler, Rockstars, Green Valley, Brutal Nature, Violent Love, Black, Ether, Secret Empire, I think I did Black twice, Secret Empire, Secret Warriors, Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man, Edge of Venomverse, X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, Cable, Weapon X, Justice League of America, Captain Atom, Super Sons, Ben Reilly the Scarlet Spider, Batwoman, The Wildstorm, Batman Beyond, Royals, Rose, May, Unstoppable Wasp, DC Metal, and Mr. Miracle. So all in all, this is about 144 different books that I picked up over the course of the last year and a half. A lot of them on my pull list, a lot of them not on my pull list. And what it really comes down to is the fact that there are very few of these books that have made it week in, week out the entire time, or have started just recently. And that's the kind of core of the topic that I really want to get to, because there's so many different comic books out there. So how do you filter out the ones that you're looking for? How do you maintain that kind of connection with those comic books? And when is it time to cut ties with a book that's no longer, connecting to you? So when we take a look at the pull list, it really comes down to what I'm going to be picking up on a regular basis. So to give you guys an idea, I've actually kind of got a little bit better idea of what we pick up. So I've got Batman by Tom King, Amazing Spider-Man because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, Doctor Strange is on my pull list, Superman, Four Kids Walk into a Bank because I'm a big fan of Matthew Rosenberg, The Fix. I've got Descender by Jeff Lemire, Renato Jones and the 1% by Kyle Andrews, The Black Monday Murders by Jonathan Hickman, Black Hammer by Jeff Lemire, Seven to Eternity by Rick Remender, Exo Manowar by Matt Kindt, All-Star Batman by Scott Snyder. And then it gets a little bit more off, like Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows is very specific. Secret Empire, was one that I was looking at, but wait, it's over. It just finished. Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man by Chip Zdarsky, that's another one that's on there, as well as DC Metal for the event, and Mr. Miracle by Tom King. I'm actually doing something specific with Mr. Miracle. Because I'm a really big fan of Mitch Gerrard's art, I'm actually getting a subscription through my pull list for Mr. Miracle and Mr. Miracle the variant cover. And that's one of the great things about a pull list. You can create specifics. You can make sure that you get exactly what you're looking for from the comic book as well as from your comic book retailer. But the real big thing is, how do you know when something is pull worthy? So I would say that the biggest determining factor is whether you think that this story arc is going to be something that you're going to stick with for the next, 3 to 5 issues. At that point in time, I would definitely put a comic book on my pull list simply because that's the best way to ensure that I'm going to get the entire story arc, because most story arcs run 3 to 5 issues. The Flash was an exception to begin with the Godspeed arc. That went like 7 or 8 issues, same thing with Deathstroke, but that's because of the much faster publishing schedule of DC currently. So, you're still telling a 7-issue story arc, but that's taking place over half the time that it would normally be from Marvel or Image or something along those lines. The other thing about having a book on your pull list, like say Descender is a very common book that goes on a hiatus. So they'll put out 4 or 5 issues at once, and then over the course of a few months, and then they'll go on a 3-month break, and then they'll come back, which is extremely common in independent books. So that always guarantees that you're going to get the next book once that first run dies off. If you're not paying attention, you might forget about this really enjoyable book. So having a book on your pull list not only shows support for that particular author, that particular artist, that particular brand, that particular story that they're telling, but it's a great way to keep in mind what you're really interested in and why you're really interested in it. The thing is, there are moments when you're no longer interested in a book. So what are the real big keys to determine when a book is no longer worthy to be on your pull list? To start off with, I'm going to say that art. A change in artist is one of the biggest impacts that a book can have. The change in a writer is very different because it's about tone, but the change in art is very specific, because if you're getting into a comic book and you're there for issue 1, you're there, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're up to issue 10, 12, and then all of a sudden at that point in time, the artist shifts over to a different project and they bring in somebody else. First off, you've created an emotional connection with that actual art and that art style. So one of the best experiences about this for me was when I was following along with Silk. Silk was on my pull list for 18 issues. But the thing is, as soon as Stacey Lee stopped doing the interior art, which was a very fun, lighthearted kind of art style, and then it switched over to Tana Ford, it just didn't necessarily jive with my thoughts about that book and how it should be presented. So it made it very easy for me to, no longer pick up that book. And then when they started doing deviations to the storyline on top of having the art that wasn't necessarily what I came to really appreciate about the character, it just made it very easy for that book to no longer get my support. Silk is a great character and she's got a lot of potential, but if you lose the art, you lose the visual appeal, the easy way to make the connections to what the story is actually trying to tell you, what is there really left? And then when we talk about, change in art, you have to talk about a change in author. That's probably the number 2 thing. Because if you have a situation where somebody is a phenomenal writer, one of the big things is that Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows started off with Jerry Conway. Jerry Conway is a classic Spider-Man storyteller. And through the first 6 issues or so, he was telling he was spinning a wonderful web of Amazing Spider-Man stories with this new Spider family. But then we transition over to a new author in Ryan Stegman. Nothing against Ryan Stegman. Ryan Stegman was the artist, and he had a real spiritual successor kind of moment when it came to telling the stories that Jerry Conway had started. But you can definitely tell there's a little bit different tone that goes along with it. The most jarring thing about the transition, though, was not the change in author. It was the change in artist, because Ryan Stegman was no longer doing the art for the book because he was writing it. So it became a situation where, one change beget the other. But you've got another situation where, say, like in Doctor Strange, you've got a very unique and powerful voice like Jason Aaron, who gave way to Dennis Hopeless. Dennis Hopeless is a very good writer in his own right, but his change to a completely different writing style that was also tied into Event, but that's a different story. His change to a completely different writing style when it came to Doctor Strange made it very apparent that that book was no longer going to speak to me, at least in that short term. So the third thing is probably the change in the entire creative team. That is a big, big change when it comes to an entire thing. And then usually this is predicated on a large project that's coming along, or you're talking about a very serious transition for the character itself. Another example, as we're talking about Doctor Strange, is that not only did we transition from Jason Aaron and Chris Bocciolo, we transitioned to a completely different artist at that point in time when we were going through the Secret Empire tie-in. However, the big thing about the next generation of Doctor Strange is going to be Donny Cates and G.H. Walta, Gabriel Walta, who did The Vision with Tom King. So that is an extremely promising team. So while one change in creative team, one change in motivation, one change in story pulled Doctor Strange off of my pull list for a short period of time, this new creative team gives me hope for that kind of situation. So that's something that I'm really excited about as far as, the Doctor Strange book. But it's a way that it makes it very easy for people to transition to a book and transition away from a book. And this kind of brings a theme about, and the biggest thing about, managing your pull list is not necessarily following characters. Everybody can be a huge fan of a character. I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man, I'm a fan of Batman, I'm a fan of Superman, I'm a fan of superheroes, I'm a fan of, stories in general. The big thing is that when it comes to creative teams always produce consistent work regardless of who is the creative, like who they're creating for. So, I'm sure that Jeff Lemire would tell a phenomenal Spider-Man story just as well as he told a phenomenal Moon Knight story, and he does a great job on Black Hammer, and he does a ton of great work. I think that just his consistency in his presentation lead him to be, pull list worthy for pretty much any project that he does. Same thing with Jason Aaron. Same thing with Matthew Rosenberg. I'm a really huge fan of what he does with his characters. So it becomes a situation where I would advocate, if you're putting together a pull list, find the books that you really enjoy. Find out who the creators were, who put that image, who put that story in your hands, and then follow them. Move to their next project. But then also still keep your main superheroes, keep your main heroes, keep your main storylines, and allow them to expose you to new people. Because if somebody's writing your character, you're going to be critical, but if they kill it, if they knock it out of the park, you found yourself somebody really special to follow along with. So when I was talking earlier, I was talking about how I'm subscribing to not only Mr. Miracle, the base, as well as Mr. Miracle, the variant. And that's one of the benefits of being on a pull list. You can actually make special recommendations or special requests of your comic book shop so that way you can get variants that wouldn't necessarily be ordered specifically. So, you might get 15, 20 copies of the regular standard book, but you might only get 3 copies that go into your local comic book shop of that one particular variant. Even if it's not a number variant, even if it's not like a 1 of 25 or something like that, they just might not necessarily order the same kind of volume because variants aren't necessarily as interesting, or they're requiring different things from the publisher in order to get them. So knowing and having those kind of thoughts in advance, it allows you to kind of get a little bit easier access to the things that you're going to want if you want something special. And then we get to the last thing that's really important about a pull list, and really it should be the first thing that's important about a pull list and how you manage it, is support. So not only does it support you and your habit, and you and your hobby, it supports your local comic book shop because they have a guaranteed number of orders. It's important for you to go and pick up your comic books and pay for them so that way they're not stuck with inventory that they're not necessarily intending to sell. But it also supports the comic books themselves. So if you are talking about a book that is a very low production number, so, like Renato Jones, the 1%, that's a 5,000 to 6,000 issue book, and that's sold inside the continental United States. Not necessarily worldwide, but it is a very low volume book. Batman does 100,000 copies, number ones of special events and things like that. They might do 200, 300,000, something along those lines. You got big pinnacle kind of issues like Star Wars 1 does like 1 million copies. It's crazy like that, but the thing that keeps comic books going once you get to issue 37 isn't necessarily the fact that, people are looking to get into that comic book. It's the people that have stuck around with that comic book, that are fans of it, that are passionate, that have it on their pull list, that keep that comic book going. So if you have a particular creator, if you have a particular character, the biggest thing that you can do is to go talk to your local comic book shop, go grab, a few off the wall, make sure that you've got a really good grasp on the story, and then put it on your pull list so that way you always know that you're going to be able to get some great entertainment when you go into the comic book shop. That's this weekly one-shot, and it's about, the purge of my pull list and how to manage your own. But I want to know what you guys think. I want to know what you guys put on your own pull list. I want to start that conversation because it's one of the things that keeps the paper part of this industry alive, and I'm really excited about, I love just holding on to a comic book and making sure that I can see it, and, it's a real presentation of the art. It's something that's lost in digital, and it might make me a bit of an old fogey when it comes to that, but it's something that I really appreciate. But I want to know what you guys think too, so hit me up in the comments down below, and we can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything having to do with comics.